This is a two-part lesson on the magic of forgiveness. Ideas are more real than facts. Ideas are the most powerful forces in the universe. Everything that exists on this planet that man has designed or has created is the result of an idea that came to be visualized or pictured in the mind of one or more persons. Every visible thing that you see in the universe was first an idea. And I'm not just talking about what we have created here on this planet, but I'm talking about the universe itself and all of its galaxies and stars and planetary systems and the life forms existing there are ideas in the universal mind of God. It's astonishing. We begin to realize the power of ideas. Modern psychology does not realize the immense power of certain kinds of ideas and their realness. You see, modern psychology does not realize that there is an order in the level of ideas. Now, certain modern thinkers like Maslow and Jung, the great psychiatrists did, they understood that every person has a hidden higher nature. Do you believe that about yourself? That already in you there is something greater than this outer psychological ego-centered self that you've been living from most of your life, that we do have a higher nature, and that higher nature is capable of accepting, of understanding, and of being transformed by the powerful ideas that are hidden in the Scriptures. The Scriptures. All great Scriptures, but most particularly the Scriptures that we have declared to be our own, that have come to us from our Judeo-Christian background, contain certain ideas. In primitive philosophy, when men divided ideas into two levels, divine and human, they understood better the existence of different orders of ideas. Now, modern thought does not recognize this great fact at all. Nowhere are we taught to discriminate between different orders of ideas. And the subject of tonight and next week's lesson, the magic of forgiveness, is based on this understanding. Forgiveness is a principle or an idea that does not exist in our purely psychological self, in our purely humanness. The Scriptures define the two levels of being that we're working with in this time on the planet as being earthy or heavenly. The earth and the heavens. Those people who are of the earth deal with and only understand a lower order of ideas. But those persons who are heavenly, meaning who are more advanced, persons who are willing to be changed, understand a higher order of ideas. A good example, a good metaphor would be an oak tree and an acorn. And the acorn would be earthy, would it not? Can you imagine that the ideas that an acorn would accept as being true would be much more limited than the ideas that an oak tree would accept? And would you believe that an acorn could accept the possibility that existing in it is an oak? One of those things? I doubt it. But think how powerful is the idea of the oak tree that's in an acorn. And under the right circumstances, that tree, the magnificent tree, begins to evolve. It begins to grow. It begins to take form and shape. But all the while, it was a living idea in something that appeared to be of a lesser order. And so it is with you, and so it is with me. And tonight we'll be talking about one of the most important ideas that we must come to understand if we are to set ourselves into movement, into motion, to become the incredible beings that we were designed by life, designed by nature to be. I told a story once before that, to me, helps to clarify the two levels of ideas that we're dealing with. Asked what he had learned at Sunday school, the 10-year-old began by telling his mother, well, our teacher told us about when God sent Moses behind the enemy lines to rescue the Israelites from the Egyptians. And you see, when they came to the Red Sea, Moses called for the engineers, his army engineers, to build a pontoon bridge. And after all of the Israelites had crossed over the Red Sea, they looked back and saw the Egyptians chasing them with their tanks. And so quick as a flash, Moses radioed headquarters on his walkie-talkie to send bombers to blow up the bridge, and he saved the Israelites. And his mother said, Bobby, is that really the way your teacher told the story? And he said, no. But if I told you what she said, you really wouldn't believe it. And you know, we really don't believe that stuff when we hear it. But it's true, and oftentimes it is telling us something about ourselves that we have not yet understood. Why do you think you're on this planet? To be a better human? No. It's very important to be a better human, but to be transformed into something that is much, much more satisfactory than being purely human. Do you know that there is a story that has come out and has been spread around for a few hundred years that salvation means being taken up to some far place in our present form, that we will go there as we are and live for, a few billion years. Now, how would you like to go in your present form, meaning not just your physical form, but with your present personality, and live for a few billion years? I couldn't bear the thought of it. There's more to us. Do you want to be saved as you are, or do you want to be transformed into something greater? And that's what the Scriptures are about, a transformation that's taking place. A few years ago, Jonathan Livingston Seagull really spread around this country like wildfire. Perhaps you remember. Why was Jonathan such a powerful instrument for the mind? It's because the story of Jonathan is nothing more than a metaphor, an example of the greatness that exists in you. And in the story of Jonathan, we begin to see these two levels of ideas. You see, we can believe things about a seagull that we wouldn't dare believe about ourselves, and yet we intuitively have known to be true. But remember the flock, the ordinary flock, and the pain of being just an ordinary seagull, the boring life that a seagull lives. And one day, Jonathan, a gull, began to discover something about himself. He began to explore flying in a different way. And remember that in the story of Jonathan, flying is but a metaphor for thinking and feeling. Jonathan intuitively began to understand that there was more to him, that he had abilities, that if he could change the formation of his wings, if he could begin to do certain things and practice diligently, that he would not be an ordinary seagull. And it happened. But remember the painful experiences that Jonathan went through, and from time to time he crashed into the sea? Well, when you and I begin to change our thinking, when we begin to reform and reshape our thoughts and feelings, doing so only because we are moved to by this inner greatness, there will be times that we'll come crashing down. You've had it happen to you. And when you crash, what's the first thing that you do? You blame yourself. Have you noticed how you blame yourself? But have you not always been blaming yourself? The universe doesn't need a devil. We're it. You do such a number on yourself that you don't need anyone else putting you down. But Jonathan grew and changed, and something absolutely wonderful happened to him. When he discovered who he was, really, this innate inner power, this wisdom, this ability to accomplish things that no other girl had accomplished, he immediately knew that the flock would be absolutely delighted to have this information, right? Wrong. He flew into them. I mean, he came sailing by at about 180 miles an hour and did a few loop-de-loops and barrel rolls and landed in the sand in front of them and said, "Whoopee, boy, have I got some good news for you." And they kicked him out of the flock. They did not forgive him. They blamed him. Why do they blame him? Because he was not like they were. Oh, the ego, that small self of us, is always judging others by how it perceives itself to be. It's always blaming and judging and condemning. True? And it's got a language. It speaks. Boy, does it talk to us. It's always talking. Talk, 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 talk. Talk, talk, talk. That's this lower earthy level of thinking. And it's that kind of thinking that keeps us, that keeps our feet firmly planted on the ground. The idea that I want to share with you is that of forgiveness, because I think it's an idea whose time has come, and I believe with all my heart that you and I will not grow beyond where we are. We will not become Jonathans. We will not feel or see or understand higher things, the higher order of things, until we have learned about forgiveness. Another idea about ideas. These higher ideas must be given in small quantities or doses, if you will. They're like certain medicines. They must be taken in small doses and regularly and over a long period of time, or we will not get well. It's virtually impossible for the mind to fully accept who we are, all in one flight. It takes a few days, a few years. It takes a while. But if we will take in a small quantity of a very powerful idea, it will transform us. And the idea of forgiveness is a very powerful idea. As a matter of fact, I would submit to you that a little bit of it will change your life dramatically. And almost instantly, you'll become a happier, healthier, more powerful, wiser person in ways that you could not anticipate or believe. The word forgive means to give up resentment against or the desire to punish, to stop being angry with or to pardon. And let's take that first part of the definition. To give up resentment against or the desire to punish. Have you noticed how that the ego, the smaller self that we function from a great deal of the time, is always ready to punish us and or others? Have you noticed how it works? So to forgive really means to give up that old way of thinking, to give up the old reactions, the old responses. Forgive means to give up all claim to punish or to exact penalty for an offense, to overlook. It means to cancel or remit a debt. It really means to begin to look at life in a new way, with a new perspective. To give up our old belief system. Among the synonyms for forgive are absolve, to clear, to release, to let people go, to liberate. And among the antonyms for forgive are accuse, to blame, to condemn, to prosecute, and to convict. And I'm not talking about taking to court. I'm talking about prosecuting them in our own minds. Have you not taken them? Have you not put them in prison? Don't tell me that you have not tried them and convicted them all in about a period of 30 seconds. We're good at it. We're experts at it. And so forgiveness means giving up this old, limited way of thinking that always separates us from the good that could be ours. I was working at my desk this morning about 11 o'clock making the notes for this talk, and my secretary buzzed me and said, there's a young man who would like to speak to you, and I told him that although you were busy with your notes, that you would surely speak to him for a moment. He's leaving for Florida. He's never met you, but he wants to tell you something. And so I picked up the phone, and there was this really enthusiastic young male voice on the other end of the line, and he said, you don't know me. You've never met me, but I know you. And I want to thank you. And I said, well, I thank you for thanking me, but tell me about what it is that you want to thank me for. He said, well, it's a strange story. He said, last Christmas, my brother-in-law, whom I probably did not like very much, gave me a set of your cassette tapes because I needed them. And I immediately did not like him as much as I did before he gave them to me. Now, you understand that, don't you? The resistance that we have when we are given something that somebody else knows that we need. He said, I began listening to them. And he said, some astonishing things have happened to me this year. He said, as a result, I'm leaving for Florida. It's a dream that I've had for a number of years. It's a goal that I set. He said, I'm being transferred by my organization. He said, you know, it all happened when I became willing to forgive. And I said, what did you say? And he said, when I became willing to forgive. I said, would you believe that I'm sitting here right now making notes on a class for forgiveness? And he said, I can't believe it. He said, I was a very unforgiving person. And my relationship with people was often stormy, particularly with my boss. And he said, after I listened to your Erroneous Zones tapes a number of times, and particularly in the section on forgiveness, in which you said, practice it even if you didn't believe it, and get down on your knees if nothing else worked. He said, I asked to have my attitude changed. And he said, one day it happened. He said, it was lifted. It was like a burden. Something was just lifted off me. He said, the surprising thing was that when I forgave everybody for everything, a whole new world opened up to me. It was as though I had a different mind. And I said, you did. You did. That is what happens when we forgive. We have a different mind. There is another mind in us. Have you not heard the instruction? Let this mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. Let it be. Now, what is probably the most, or the second most often suggestion or admonition or instruction that he gave? You know what it was? To forgive. Did you know that? To forgive, meaning to give up, to release, to let go of your concepts about how things should be and about people. To accept them as they are. Matthew, the 18th chapter. Then Peter came to him and asked, Sir, how often should I forgive a brother who sins against me? 7 times? Well, that would seem like a lot, wouldn't it? 7 times? Forgive him 7 times? Jesus said, no! Exclamation point. 70 times 7. Or what he meant was, as many times as it takes you to stop blaming him in the first place. Because ultimately, we're not going to be where we have to keep score and say, okay, I've got 97 things to forgive you for, and I'm going to do it before I go to bed tonight. We reach the place where we don't keep score at all, where it does not matter what you do or who you are. I love you and I accept you. I won't let you build a fire in my living room carpet, but that's different. I'll not accept your unacceptable behavior, but I give you the right to be that way and to experience the consequences. I will not experience your consequences, nor will I any longer experience my consequences of blaming and judging you and of reacting to you, of letting you become the driving force in my life because of my negative responses. And he said, forgive them. Stop blaming them. And he told a story about a person who would not do so and what happened, the price that that person had to pay. It was not 10 minutes from that time until my secretary buzzed me and said that there was someone in the waiting room to see me, and I went out. This man is a wonderful man. I tell you, he's one of the sweetest people that I know. And I could tell that he really wanted to see me. I didn't have the time, but I didn't tell him that. And he said he was driving in the area and thought that perhaps I might be free and we could talk for a few moments. And I said, okay, let's talk. And he had discovered, he had learned, perhaps not long ago, that his son is a homosexual. And he was having a great deal of difficulty with it, with making his peace. And we talked about accepting. God, grant me the serenity to accept what I cannot change. God, grant me the serenity to let go of my ideas about how you should be, or the earth should be. You see, sometimes we think that people are the way they are because they have chosen to be that way. Do you think that I chose to be an alcoholic? Many people thought I did, and perhaps some still do. It was not until I forgave myself for being an alcoholic, until I accepted it and saw it as one of my greatest blessings, perhaps my greatest blessing. It became my greatest blessing. And through that forgiveness, through giving up my old ideas about it, I came to understand things that have never been written in books. I can understand things about me and understand things about you that you may never tell me, but I understand. And so we talked about his son and about accepting him as he is formed and shaped. God loves us as we are. Do we not know that? And each one of us is on our own track, on our own path. I accept you where you are, knowing that you're in the process of changing and of growing. And he told me that his son was over for Thanksgiving and surely felt the acceptance that he had given him. And I said, not so, because you haven't forgiven him to this very moment. Now do it. There's nothing to forgive. What is there to forgive? Only to accept. Ask to be forgiven for not understanding. If I do not understand you, then I ask my forgiveness. I ask your forgiveness that I do not understand. I accept you, and I release you. You are God's beloved, and God looked at this glorious planet when it was created and said, look, behold, it is very good, and I accept that fact. Matthew, the 6th chapter. Jesus said, there is a saying, love your friends and hate your enemies. A saying? It's a way of life. It's a standard for the ego. It's the way that all acorns are. Acorns love other acorns, except the black acorns don't like the brown ones. And if there are any white acorns around, they're in real trouble, except they don't like the black and the brown. Do you follow what I'm saying? Because there is something in we acorn-minded persons who only accept what looks and acts like us. And it is to let go and to accept. Why? Why? An acorn cannot grow until it forgives, until it stops seeing itself as an acorn and begins to see that there's something more in it. There's something more in us, and this is this dichotomy of thinking that Jesus was teaching us about. He said, love your friends and hate your enemies. When I say love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you'll be acting as true sons and daughters of your Father in heaven. For he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust too. And he said, what have you done if you love your friends? Even the scoundrels do that. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Now listen to that. You are to be perfect, meaning you are to be perfected. And you cannot be perfected until you love. And one of the major aspects of love is forgiveness. It is the acceptance of things the way they are. One of the teachers of religion who was standing there, this is the 12th chapter of Mark, listening to the discussion, realized that Jesus had answered well. So he asked, of all the commandments, which is the most important? And he replied, the one that says, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, meaning there's only one mind, one Spirit, in all and through all and over all. And you must love him with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. And if we're going to love God, then I must love God in you. Is that not true? Does this mean just love the God of my particular religion? You know, there is no God of anyone's particular religion. Did you know that? God is not a religious figure. God is the one presence and the one mind, the one power of the universe. And, you know, thank God that God is not a Christian or a Jew. We'd all be in real trouble. God is above our concepts. It is the surrendering of our concepts that we begin to understand and to experience God. And the greatest surrendering of all is that of forgiveness, or of giving up, of letting go. The word forgive comes from an ancient root word which means to grab hold of. But it means to release what you have grabbed hold of. It means that you must release everything that you have grabbed hold of with your mind, because your mind can only hold at this level the ideas that come from our lower level of thinking. And as long as we hold on to what we believe, we cannot experience that which is beyond our belief. I believe, but help my unbelief. Let me see what is real by surrendering what I have conceived to be true. Have you never had the experience of someone seeing you for the first time, and you seeing them for the first time, and the incredible sweetness and understanding that begins to flow between you? It is remarkable. And as it is with an individual, so it is with the race of us. And this is what the Master was attempting to teach us. Pete is an alcoholic. He's been sober for 10 years. He has a daughter, Mary, who is in her mid-30s, and she has 2 sons. Pete loves Mary, and he loves his grandsons. But he doesn't like Mary's husband, George. Pete thinks that his son-in-law, George, is a wimp. And he doesn't hide his feelings. He's very honest. You know, sometimes we call it honesty. Well, Mary wrote Pete a scathing letter recently. And she said that she was so sick and tired of him and his judgments over the years, and she no longer considered him to be a member of her family. And she outlined the hurts that she had experienced from him from the time that she was a small girl up until that moment, and those hurts were quite considerable. But Pete, in speaking to me, said, why can she not understand that I was that way because I was an alcoholic? I said, maybe she will never understand and forgive you until you forgive George. Well, Pete wanted to know what George had to do with it. Are you following my drift? Mary is still defending people from Pete, first her mother and now her husband. And the circle of resentments and confusion continues unbroken. And I told Pete that George was none of his business, that Mary had decided to marry George. That was their affair. You know how that oftentimes we get our business mixed up with other person's business, and we want them to do it the way that we would have done it? Oh, God grant me the serenity to accept, which means to forgive, which means to let go of my old ideas. God grant me the serenity to let go of all of my concepts about how things should be, so that I can experience things as they really are. Because things as they really are trying to happen to us. I have mixed love with forgiveness, and perhaps it may have confused you for a moment, but let me point out that forgiveness is not normal to our purely human condition, nor is love normal to our purely human condition. There's a possessive love that we experience at our human or earthy or acorn level, and it is, I love you and therefore I possess you, therefore you will do what I tell you to do, or I'll be very disappointed. And if I'm very disappointed, you'll discover it very shortly. And whatever happens, it happens. It's your fault because I love you. You understand that kind of love, don't you? We have both given and received that kind of love. Well, Paul had an experience of this higher level of thinking. And from that experience, he spoke from its wisdom about love. It's the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, and time does not permit me to read it all to you. Love is very patient and kind. It is never jealous or envious, never boastful or proud, never haughty or selfish or rude. Love does not demand its own way. It is not irritable or touchy. Love does not hold grudges. Love does not hold grudges? Did I read that right? And will hardly even notice when others do it wrong. That's the kind of love that does not need to forgive. It accepts. It is never glad about injustice. You mean it doesn't like for people to get their due? Their just due, we say. But rejoices whenever truth wins out. Now we know so little, even with our special gifts. And the preaching of those most gifted is still so poor. But when we have been made perfect and complete, now we're back to that being made perfect and complete again, aren't we? I wonder where that came from. It's an idea whose time has come. Did I not tell you that? This idea that there is something in us that's trying to be perfected, and that loving and forgiving are the key. That we must begin to think and feel and to relate to other persons and to ourselves in a new way. That we must let go of all of the old ideas that we have been taught and that we have accepted, that we're holding on to with our minds, the ideas that cause us to feel guilty and frightened. You see, the ego must hold on to anything that will make it feel guilty or fearful or angry. Because it cannot exist without those conditions. Cannot exist without them. You've heard me say before that originally it was believed that guilt and fear were only for Jews and Catholics. And then it was discovered that they're for everyone. And all of us have experienced them. But it's the letting go of guilt. Because it is letting go of that process. And this comes and must come from forgiving ourselves. From forgiving ourselves. Next week I'm going to talk about forgiving other persons, but this week I really want us to take the time that we have to talk about forgiving ourselves so that we can begin this process of being made perfect and complete. Then the need for these inadequate special gifts will come to an end and they will disappear. This is what Paul said. One of you was in Florida recently, this last week. And you spoke to me about a man that I will let me call him Bill. Happens to be a minister. And you were talking about his excitement for life, his enthusiasm. I know Bill. I've known Bill for about 15 years, and Bill was known for a period of time in his life from coast to coast. He was not famous, he was infamous, and from the standpoint that there was never a church that he took that was not in such deep trouble that he could not create another disaster there. And he did it in a most spectacular way. And in time, In time, what went out for him came back, and he was consumed. He was consumed by his alcoholism, his attitude. This man became one of the angriest, most resentful people that I have ever known since I gave up the crown some years ago. He blamed everyone but himself. But of course, in reality, he was only blaming himself. And if I blame myself, if I have not forgiven myself, then I must put the blame on you. You know how that is. Have you never attended your own funeral? I've attended mine on numerous occasions, and my casket was always up there toward that wall, and it was a beautiful hall. It was marble and drapes and great paintings and flowers. People were just in such a tearful state. As they walked slowly by and looked at my face, I never saw me, but I was there. And as they looked at me, they each took their own share of their responsibility, their rightful responsibility for me being there. If it had not been for them, this would not have happened to me. And as they spoke, asking for my forgiveness, but of course it was too late. You do understand, don't you? I spoke to them as they spoke to me there. And they were so sorry for what they had done and for what they had failed to do. And I would say, yes, you son of a gun. Was that not me talking to me about me, but blaming them? Well, so did Bill blame them. And it was 2 years ago in January, and a number of us were about to leave on a cruise, and word came to me that Bill was in great distress and not very far away, and his life would soon be terminated with cancer. And several of us went by, a car full of people on our way to a cruise. And we spent perhaps 2 hours. It was a mastermind meeting. And in that 2 hours, this man forgave himself. He forgave himself for all of the incredibly bizarre things he had done, for all the mistakes that he had made. And there was a sweetness in that room. There was a power in that room. There was a presence in that room that you would not believe. And I have chill bumps as I tell you. This man was near death. And we knew that he would live. Incredible things happen when we surrender our animosity, our hate, our blaming, our judgment. But remember that the law is, as we've been told, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. But do you know that we cannot love another person more than we love ourselves? We cannot begin to love. We cannot begin to forgive. We cannot begin to let go of the blaming that we have toward other persons until we surrender our ideas, our concepts, our self-hate. A year passed, and Bill wrote this letter to me. Dear Jack, apocatastasis. Your tapes on serenity were great. Finished my final checkup with the surgeon. Great report. Radiologist says everything is gone. Feeling better every day. Lots of prayers. And my working on me did the job. I'm ready to go back to work soon. In between time, strange and wonderful things are going on in me. I lost my life and found it! Exclamation point. Isn't that what we're talking about? The losing of our lives? The losing of our purely human identity? The letting go of the concepts that we have held on to with our minds, setting ourselves free and all others. Lost my life and found it, accepting life, giving up all anger, resentment, and fear. This is one of the most remarkable statements you'll ever hear me read, because I knew this man. I knew him. Apocatastasis. Our best wishes on you and yours. I have seen the most amazing things happen when a person forgives themselves. But sometimes we need help, and in my case, many years ago, it was when I discovered my own alcoholism, and let me tell you that I disliked me so intensely that I tried to take my life, and almost succeeded. I hated my life. I hated being alive. I could not bear the dawning of a new day. But it was only an attitude. It was only the accumulation of concepts and feelings and anger and blaming and judging. And I asked to be changed. I asked to be changed. And it happened. I didn't ask to be supported or to be believed. I asked to be changed. I could not bear being the way that I was. And that change began to take place in me. It's still taking place in my life. And at any rate, I became a member of the 12-step program that you know as Alcoholics Anonymous. And in that program, I discovered the 12 steps that will transform you. And the cassette series that I've done, 12 Steps to a Spiritual Experience, tell or give the process, the step 4 of a personal inventory. I was shown how to go back and look at my life from its inception and to see, to record the things that had happened and my reactions to those things, and to be able to look at the accumulation that had taken place over all the years, and then to go back and release, to set me free from the accumulation of the concepts and of the feelings and of the emotions. I tell you, it is incredible. The Mastermind Principle is based on those 12 steps, as you know. And every week, as a matter of fact, every day, I check myself out and make sure as I can be, that I hold not one thing against any living person. It's the greatest gift I can give myself. Never again do I wish to go to sleep at night blaming or judging or accusing or thinking that somehow you are at fault in terms of my own experience. I am 100% responsible for my experience and for my state of mind. I'll never forget the shock that I experienced the first day that I looked into a mirror, directly into my own eyes in the mirror, and said, "Jack Boland, I love you, and I forgive you, and I set you free." I do it often now, but I was so embarrassed. I love me, and I regularly forgive me. And because I forgive me, I can forgive you. I can go even better than that. I don't even have to blame you. Wow. We must particularly beware lest, becoming annoyed at others, we allow ourselves to be dragged down to their level, said Marcus Aurelius. The best way of avenging thyself is not to become like the wrongdoer. Men exist for the sake of one another. Teach them or bear with them. Love them then and set them free. I am very patient and kind. The real self of you can speak these words because it is love. I am very patient and kind. I am never jealous or envious, never boastful or proud. I am never haughty or selfish or rude. I do not demand my own way. I am not irritable or touchy. I do not hold grudges and will hardly even notice when others do me wrong. I am never glad about injustice, but rejoice when truth wins out and others are set free. When I love someone, I will be loyal to him or her no matter what the cost. I will always believe in them, always expect the best for them, and always stand my ground in defending them. All the special gifts and powers from God will someday come to an end, but my love and my forgiveness go on forever. Because my love and your love is not our love at all. It is God loving and forgiving us through each other. And we'll never know God until we love ourselves and forgive others. That's the way it really is.